Hi everyone, thanks for being with me. It's glad that you could be with me on this lovely warm Thursday afternoon in Adelaide. And I'm just trying to get through on YouTube, on Facebook, but that didn't happen again. Other issues there, which I thought I'd sorted out during the week because I did a YouTube post that had lots and lots of people recognising or at least looking at what we've been doing. I'd just like to say before I introduce Avery and talk about the topics that are important to us, I'd just like to suggest that you subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications, do whatever you need to do in order to let me know how you're going on my YouTube channel and to subscribe to that. Make some comments below because I love hearing from you, positive or negative. Whatever you have to say to me is important to me. So I hope that I will hear from you in the future. So one of the things that we're going to be talking about today are tariffs and how they impact Australia and how you and I particularly might feel and how Avery feels about tariffs, what's happening in the United States and also what's happening in Australia in relation to these tariffs and what is it that we could be doing to perhaps ensure that our economic well-being is maintained and that we're safe from the chaos that is the US. And also, we need to note what's happening in Europe in terms of them banding together in order to consolidate their own stance around Donald Trump and what that specifically means. And whether or not, and it's interesting that there was, and Avery and I will talk about this in just a minute, but there was a meeting of military leaders in France, I think it was, over the last couple of days, which also incorporated the UK and Australia and lots of other nations as well. 34 nations in total, I think, attended that particular meeting, which is all a result of what's happening in terms of the United States divesting themselves of their long-held power and authority over the world and now becoming the pariah of the world as a result of all of that. So I will now welcome aboard my friend, my buddy, my mate, the person that means a lot to me because he's got more to say than I have, and that is Avery. Hey, buddy, good to see you.
I'm good. It's good to see you as well, Tony.
How was that intro? Was that powerful enough for you? Did it get you going?
It certainly was. And I value these discussions that we have and value having you as one of my best friends.
Thanks, buddy. Likewise, as I said. Yeah. Because the great thing, I guess, about us, and the great thing about a lot of podcasts, I think, is that those people that are... I haven't yet seen a podcast where two people had diametrically opposed opinions and were fighting amongst each other, unless we're watching Piers Morgan or Mighty Hassan debate somebody about an issue. And I think the great point about us and our podcast is that this is an opportunity just to share ideas and hopefully also to get ideas from other people, so people to comment in our comment section about the things that we're talking about and whether they agree or disagree. I think it's really important. And whether that's now during our live feed or whether that's later on when people rewatch it, doesn't really matter, I guess, providing those comments are there and we'll get to them and we will respond accordingly. So tell me, what do you think about this, the tariffs, what's happening, whether or not Australia have done the right thing by simply trying their best to negotiate all of this? And did we fail by not getting what the rest of the world failed to get, which is exemptions from tariffs? Or do you think we just did the best we could and that Trump's a dick and there's very likelihood of there being any significant change around any of that? What do you think?
Well, even if we did do the best that we could, Trump is still a dick.
Fair enough.
Yeah. If we impose tariffs on the United States, it has an impact on the people here. So I can understand the Prime Minister being reluctant to impose tariffs because it will impact our economy. It will impact the prices that we pay for eggs, or
so this you're talking about is retaliatory tariffs. Yeah. So you tariff us, we tariff you. Bingo, the war starts. And I guess no one's the winner at the end. Actually, my wife and I we were out earlier on, and when we were out, we're sort of saying how it's interesting how eggs have become the barometer of what's happening in relation to cost of living, and
Yeah.
how crazy that is that eggs, you can crack a few eggs. So there's some symbolic notion too around eggs. I think is that they're easily broken, they're fragile, and it's a bit like the economy itself.
Yeah.
You know.
The thing about tariffs, whether we should impose them, is how much trade do we actually do with the United States? I mean, Trump said that he would impose tariffs on Russia, but they only do last year. They only did about $3 billion worth of trade. I mean, it would be a pointless exercise if if we're selling them, say 3, 4, $5 billion worth of goods, and that's it. Imposing a tariff on it is not going to have that much of an impact on the United States. If we
Well,
were selling them
but
$200
that's the
billion
whole
worth,
But that's the whole point, wasn't it? Because the reality is that we have a surplus with the United States. So we import from the United States far more than we export.
yeah. So if we impose a tariff on goods coming from the United States, it's going to have uh, a negative impact on our economy. Right?
Mm.
Because if the goods are coming in, I'm not sure what goods they are, but if any goods that come in from the United States, if we impose a tariff on those, it jacks up the prices here because it's us that pay it, not the United States. Contrary to the lies that the dickhead in chief is constantly promoting. It's the
And the
it's the
yeah, and the argument that I don't understand is that Trump's argument is that all these countries owe them because they hold um, because other countries hold a surplus or a deficit, I should say. So, so for other countries, because the American produce so much stuff, they sell that stuff overseas. But what they're importing isn't isn't as great. So the issue becomes, well, in Australia's case, it's to your advantage that you trade with us because it's a
yeah,
surplus. It's
yeah,
it's a good thing for you because we owe you money, more money than what you owe us. Whereas with a lot of other countries, it's different. And the other thing too, I think that's interesting too, is that Europe's now saying Europe actually has exports more to the United States than the United States does to Europe.
yeah.
So it's the other way around. So none of this, quite frankly, look, it confuses the shit out of me to be honest, but none of it makes sense.
Yeah. Well,
It's
nothing
it.
that Trump says makes sense.
Oh, that's true.
I mean, tariffs are not necessarily bad. It depends upon the reason that you're imposing them. So if you're imposing them because, Canada's we're subsidizing Canada at the tune of $200 billion a year. No, you're not subsidizing. You're paying more. You're buying more goods from Canada than you're selling to Canada.
I
Right.
thought
So
I, I thought the whole notion was actually about free trade. So
ideally, yeah.
isn't this what the world is supposed to be doing? Trading
That,
basically,
well,
just exchanging goods between one country and another. This is what we do,
that's
and,
what.
and we have to become better at producing goods that the rest of the world wants. So it's
Yeah.
about increasing our productivity and so on. Isn't
Yeah.
that really what this should be all about?
Yeah. Absolutely. Because uh, the huge rise in prosperity all around the world started with people hate it, but globalization
Hmm.
with when with free trade agreements being set up, NAFTA, right? The economies in the United States, Mexico, and Canada all skyrocketed with NAFTA. In the European Union, when that was set up, the the prosperity of all of the nations in that were in the EU skyrocketed. The UK's that increased when they joined the EU back in 1972. It wasn't called the EU then, but it was a free trade agreement. In 2016, was it? They
Hmm.
voted to leave the European Union, and look what's happened to the UK economy. It is crashing.
Yeah,
right? Because now, as soon as they left the EU, they had to pay tariffs on goods that they imported from.
yeah, there's a discussion actually in the UK now around the 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 problems that being separate from the EU have created for the UK. Not just
Yeah,
about people crossing the border and all the other things and the money side of things, and they're now back to the pound versus the euro and all that sort of stuff. Apart from all of that, it's about being excluded from activities
yeah,
that are now the EU is now involved. So the EU Parliament gets together, but to the exclusion of the UK. The EU
yeah,
decides on what policies they're going to develop in terms of tackling Trump, but the UK is excluded from those discussions.
yeah.
So I think there's a lot of belated buyers. What is it?
Remorse.
Remorse as a result
Yeah,
of leaving now, particularly because of what's happening in relation to tariffs.
yeah. If you're a member of a club and you want the rules changing, you can work to change the rules.
Yeah,
But you can't change the rules if you're not a member of that club.
no,
If you don't
no,
like something, if the UK doesn't like something that the EU's doing, the only way they could change it is to be a member,
yeah,
right? And then if they met, one of the biggest reasons that people voted against the EU to leave the EU was because they didn't like the idea of Poles just coming across the channel into the UK and taking jobs. They didn't like Romanians coming in or Italians or whatever. A lot of them really didn't like Pakistanis coming into Europe or Iraqis or something like that. Right? An awful lot. All of my cousins, well, most of my cousins, they live in the UK, and nearly all of them voted for Brexit. And when I asked them about why, it was because of those Pakis coming in, as they put it, those Iraqis coming in, those Romanians and Poles. We don't want them here. You know, and
and
there was a huge amount of,
I
there
don't
was a
think
huge amount of
necessarily,
hatred about it.
I don't think that stopped either. Like that was
No,
pie in the sky shit. That
well,
hasn't happened,
the
but
thing was that because that Romania, for example, is a member of the EU, they could just get on an airplane and fly to London and get off and no passport. They could drive up to Calais, go across on the ferry, get on the Eurostar train from Paris, go across the Channel into London and find a job. Right, and people didn't like it. Not there's a lot of. I mean, the UK, like this country, is a multicultural. It's very diverse. It's and to me, that that diversity improves the country culturally, socially, economically. It's a net benefit all round. You
But
know,
some people unfortunately don't see it that way, and we're
I
going to
know.
get to that subject in just a moment in
Yeah,
relation to a senator that you're fascinated with. But before we do get there, though, Avery, I'm wondering whether we could just talk about the Australia's response, whether or not Australia could have done anything different than what we've done, whether we've pushed the envelope far enough. And I saw Albanese today talking about whether or not we should, he could have done more. And he made a really good point. He said that if I'd travelled to Europe, if I'd visited NATO, if I'd gone to the UK, if I'd gone to America, if I'd travelled around the world, Dutton and the Liberal Party would have complained that he was out of Australia when needed. So the poor bastard doesn't think he could win no matter what he did.
yeah,
And then, we have we have Rudd as the ambassador in the US doing his best. And I think there's got to be said about. I'm not a fan, I hasten to add, but
yeah,
I think he's doing the best that he can do. And then we have Malcolm Turnbull, of course, turning up on television around the world now and talking about what a terrible person Trump is, and I'm sure that hasn't helped the cause at all. And then on top of that, we've got this AUKUS deal where now people are saying, can we trust the United States to follow through? I mean, I don't agree with AUKUS either. Anyway, another story, another issue for another time. But I think that we're getting to a point where we're going to have to make a decision about whether we need to separate our ties from the US entirely, not only AUKUS, but all the other agreements we've got, and and decide to do things on our own or look for other people that we can do those things with. What do you think?
Well, I don't think we should entirely separate ourselves from the United States. We shouldn't entirely separate ourselves from any country, including
Oh,
places like.
here we're going to have a matter of disagreement. We were just talking about whether or not you and I would disagree on anything. I reckon we've now hit upon it, Avery.
I don't think we should entirely. I'm not saying we shouldn't stop some things that we do with the United States, for example, but I don't think we should cut all ties. Right? I don't think we should cut all ties with Russia. No, we shouldn't cut all ties, any ties that we've got with, say, North Korea. Right? But
I didn't. I wasn't actually aware that we had ties
well,
with
that's what I say.
Russia.
If we've got any, I don't know what ties we've got with them. Right? But
Well, it depends on what one refers to as ties. I'm talking about, I think, being reliant upon. Because I just need to say this. There was a time when we were extremely reliant on Britain. I'm reading a book at the moment which is about our alliances and whether we should rely on America. This is where all this stuff's coming from for me. And it's a fascinating book, actually, because it talks about how we were dragged in. Well, we were committed to the First World War. We were dragged into the Second World War because of our allegiances to Britain. And Britain bailed us out in terms of, rebuilding and all that sort of shit, I think. But really, at the end of the day, what was the benefit for us? All of those wars, apart from the Second World War where the Japanese got involved and were attacking Darwin, we shouldn't have got involved. There's the Vietnam War we shouldn't have got involved in, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, not Saudi Arabia, but Iraq. There's all these other wars which have failed, and the United States has been involved in something like 130 conflicts since 1900,
yeah.
and we have been following them in every one. And the question for me, which I would like to hear your view on, is, so when we talk about ties, I'm not suggesting we get rid of everything, that'd be silly, but and become an isolationist. But I am suggesting that we should stop the mentality that says that we must be reliant upon them for security and for even our financial well-being. I think that's ridiculous. What do you think?
Well, the problem with not relying on the United States for our security is we are approximately the same area as the United States. We've got a 15th of the population. There is no way we could defend ourselves if China decided to attack us. We would have to start learning Mandarin, within a few weeks. There is no way we could.
I'm starting now. I've decided that I'm starting to take on. I thought Korean might be a good language, and Mandarin as well.
Everybody should learn a second language.
But I think, my point is, there's a time when I was at school, there's a thing about learning Indonesian.
The point is about do we not be reliant on the United States? Is that I don't think we've got any choice because of the fact that although we've got the same geographical area, we've got 1/15 of the population. We've got 50,000-60,000 people in total in our armed forces. There is no way we could defend ourselves if Indonesia decided to invade.
Yeah, well, that's
we couldn't defend ourselves. So we've got
when was the last? Okay,
like the United States?
When was the last time you heard any conflict between Indonesia and the Philippines that had anything to do with us, apart from Timor? Where was the last time there was any conflict whatsoever between those our closest nations? And Malaysia is also included in that. There hasn't been for a long time. Our relationships with them is a really good relationship. Our relationship with Papua New Guinea, which was sort
Yeah.
of a colony of ours till recent times, is good. So why not Japan? Our relationship with Japan is very good.
Yeah.
Our relationship
Yeah.
with Vietnam and other countries,
Yeah.
Southeastern countries.
The UK's relationship with Germany was good for a while, right?
Yeah,
And then Adolf Hitler came along.
but it's
The
much
U,
better
the U,
now. But
is much
it's
better
out,
now.
it's out.
But that doesn't mean that something the UK the okay, the European Union, the NATO, the 29 countries in NATO, for the past 30 years, they've had good relations with the United States. And what have they got now? They all look at the United States and say, we can't trust them,
Yeah.
right? The fact that for a long time it's been good doesn't mean it's going to stay good. All you need is to have a wannabe tyrant like Trump take over in a country. Go to Indonesia. We get somebody like Trump take over in there, and he looks south and says, "Australia's a big country. I think I'll make it the the 27th province of Indonesia," and
Well,
they decide to invade.
I mean,
Right?
my
We've
point
got to be
is,
prepared for that sort of thing.
my point
I'm
is
not
that
saying they will.
yeah. But my point is that we have been. There's a couple of issues here. We've been far too reliant, I think, on these countries like Britain. No longer reliant on Britain, and that we've done okay as a result of not being reliant upon them. We're also we have become more and more reliant on the United States because they saw an opportunity to ensure that the Pacific region is safe and that the shipping channels are clear and that goods can get from China, heaven forbid, or from other countries through to the United States. They also have a base in Guam. So they have a vested interest in ensuring that the Pacific is a safe place. Trump, though, has no version or no understanding of what the geopolitical issues are, doesn't
No,
care,
not at all.
and therefore neither should we. Except I think that we could start thinking about, and people will hate me for this, but I think we could start building some alliances with, or stronger alliances. They're not necessarily military alliances, but a better relationship with our neighbours, those that I mentioned earlier, including China. You know,
Yeah.
that there's an opportunity here for us to build better relationships with China. South Korea is another one. And say, bugger the United States, we don't really, what do we need you for anyway? Is it just, do we need you just because you've got some big submarines and some big ships? You've got an air force and you carry nuclear weapons. Is this really all that we need you for? Or do we, can we manage without all of that stuff and do our own thing?
Well, I don't think we can, again, because we are
Well,
population-wise.
size of our country and population, I think is. I mean, really, if
It is
what
relevant
is it? What
because
is it? What is it that Australia would have, apart from rare minerals, of which we've got plenty, incidentally, and our mining industry? What do countries want? A hunk of desert? I mean, we're mostly desert. And would you take over a country like Australia? Because at the end of the day, that'd be a bloody fight that no one
well,
would want.
yeah, there would be a fight, but if it was a country like China, we would lose that fight. Why might a country decide to take over that that big block of land because it's desert? Well,
But
go and look
China,
at hang on, go and look at the history of North Africa, where France went in and took Algeria, Morocco, uh, Tunisia, Mali, Mauritania, all desert countries with
okay, but
bugger all in them.
okay, tell me who have China taken over?
Who have China taken over?
Yeah,
Tibet. There's
uh,
that one leaps. Manchuria,
apart from
right?
Tibet, apart from those countries, to what extent is there any indication that China is as imperialistic as they do it differently? I hasten to add through soft power, but nevertheless, but are as imperialistic as the United States and Britain.
To what extent are they as imperialistic? They use, as you said, soft power.
They do.
They use this road
They don't use their
development.
army, or they don't invade a country and say we're going to take you over. They
No,
have other more nefarious ways, more subtle
yeah,
ways, I should say, of
yeah,
doing it, which to me makes far more sense. But
yeah.
but I don't see, there is no historical situation in recent times that would tell you that China is an aggressor. The only, like, for God's sake, they could, if they were the aggressor, their closest little island happens to be Taiwan. They could have friggin' taken over Taiwan a long time ago, But if it
Well,
wasn't for the fact that they're manufacturing all these microchips,
how how far back in time are you going?
well, I don't know. How about recent?
Recent, okay. Why would they not do it? Not attempt it? Because the United States has got a treaty with Taiwan to defend it. The United States has got 7,000 nuclear weapons. China's not going to take that one.
Yeah, but do you honestly believe that Donald Trump would give a shit about a little island, which for
No,
him has no meaning whatsoever, because they're planning to make all those same microchips back in the US? That they
no.
don't want to import them, they want to make them, they want to
Trump,
manufacture them. He would find Taiwan as an irritation rather than someone
he,
they need to defend.
Trump doesn't care about his own people. So why would he care about yellow-skinned people? Why would he care about brown-skinned people?
But
He
that's my
doesn't.
whole. But that's my whole
Yeah, I
argument.
know.
My whole
Sorry?
argument that it is that he who represents the United States don't care about
Yeah,
those people, or the people in Philippines, or the people in Indonesia, or people in Australia for that matter. He doesn't give a
yeah, he
shit.
doesn't. He
So,
doesn't. But
so
the
why
thing
should
is,
we care then? But that's my point, Avery. Why should we care about them and what's in their self interest when they don't give a shit about what's in ours?
Trump is 78 and a half, 78 years old, 78 years, 6 months, something like that. He's not going to live forever. One of these days, I'm hoping soon, we're going to see his obituary, right? That guy, when he's gone, if he dies within the next 4 years, we've got JD Vance. But he's not going to be there forever, and the Republicans aren't going to be there forever. And with what Trump is doing right now, I'm convinced that in 2026, the Democrats are going to take the House and the Senate. Right, that'll put a brake on what Trump is doing, especially if they can get super majorities in both of them, because then they can get veto-proof majorities on everything they pass. That he can't undo it. Then in 2028, when he's evicted from office, hopefully by a Democrat, we can start to work towards putting things back to the way they were. That doesn't mean we've got to go back to exactly what we had in 2020, right? In 2024, but because there's things, like trade agreements we've
But
got with the United States, they can still be improved,
but
right?
my
Trade agreements we've got with China can be improved.
I guess my point is, at what point, like, if at what, God, how can I put this? If my view of the world, and you know this because I've talked about this before too, in my own personal experience, if someone crosses me and diminishes me or puts me down, or whatever, and they have been a friend, in my view, they're no longer a friend.
Yeah,
I will dispense with you. I've got lots of examples where I've done that in my life, because I don't want toxic people or people that I can't trust in
yeah.
my world. So the same thing applies to the United States. To what extent should we ever, after they've elected someone like Trump, in what world should we even consider that they can ever be
Well,
a friend again?
think about how he won. Right? He got only 56% of the possible electorate turned out. He got 49.8% of the numbers that did turn out, so he hasn't got a majority of the American people. He got about 27% of the total electorate. Right? He does not. He doesn't. he speaks for the United States because he's the president, but he's not speaking for the average American citizen, most of whom cannot stand the man, most of whom cannot stand what he's doing.
But
Right?
I
Even a
guess,
lot of his Republican supporters, his MAGA cultists,
yeah,
are
I guess that's my
complaining now.
point. That's my point, though, Avery, is that he can't be trusted.
He can't
The American system itself says to us
himself.
all that we can't trust this system. I mean,
Well,
it's a crazy system, and we cannot,
it,
under any circumstance, find the space to be able to trust them, because the trust, it's like a relationship. That trust, in my view, has gone.
okay, we've got in Australia, we've got a good level of trust with, say, Indonesia
Yep.
or New Zealand. Go with New Zealand. We've got a good level of trust with
Yep.
them. Let's say, God forbid, that Palmer wins sufficient seats that he forms government, and he starts.
That
Just let me run this through. Let's say that Palmer wins sufficient seats that he can form government all by himself and he implements Trump policies. Does that mean that all that he represents all Australians? No. Does it? He does in the sense that he's the prime minister, but does he represent what we really think, what we really believe? The answer is no. Should New Zealand say, well, screw them, we're going to have nothing to do with Australia ever again? That's what you're saying we should be doing with the United States, right?
no,
Trump is not going to live forever, right?
I'm not
He's going to
saying
be
that we
dead.
shouldn't have. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have anything to do with them ever again. I'm saying that we should uh, restrict. Well, firstly, we should start to understand that we can't trust them. Number two, then therefore we should be wary of them. We should say, you know, we know that you guys are just as likely to turn around and stab us in the back. So we need to do things that are protecting us, which in this
Oh,
instance is
I,
about having different alliances apart from the United
yeah,
States.
I, I don't disagree.
Very
We
good.
shouldn't be, we shouldn't be 100% or 90% reliant on the United States.
Or anybody else
We
for that matter, I
no,
think.
no, but we've got to have those agreements with other countries, whether it's the United States or the UK, South Africa, Guam. Oh, well, not Guam, that's American. Tuvalu. It doesn't matter
Mm.
who they are. We should have those alliances with them, right? Uh, because it benefits us and it benefits them as well,
Yeah,
right?
we need to have. You see, you can't even have alliances with like-minded people, because if you have alliances with China, there's so many differences there politically and everything else. But also, you know, there's some incredible differences just in the United States. Their
Yeah,
their election system is so fucked that it makes you wonder whether or not, you know, based on what you just said earlier, in fact, it makes you wonder why you could trust them with such a flawed, undemocratic system such as
yeah,
theirs, compared to, and this is patting us on the back, compared to ours, which
yeah,
at least represents the best uh, the best percentage of votes and what the population want, more
yeah.
so than in the United States.
Well, I'm going to plug my YouTube channel now because on Perspectives with Avery, I did a video
Go
all
for it.
about U.S. democracy.
About
Right?
what?
Is it the greatest democracy? I did a
All right.
video all about the U.S. democracy. Is it the greatest democracy in the world? No. And I explain why, because I talk all about the Electoral College, how it's undemocratic, how it's the only country on the planet that uses that. If they want a truly democratic elections, what they should be doing is having the person's got to win the majority of the votes. Ideally, I say in there that ideally voter registration should be automatic. You reach the age of 18, you're automatically put on the roll, right? And that it doesn't matter where you live, you can just go and vote. We should make changes like that here as well. I think, that if you move house, why do you need to? I'm not. Why do you need to tell
Because
the electoral commission I've moved house?
we have
Right?
different electorates in which we vote.
We do. Uh,
We live in a representative democracy.
I know we do. The United States is a representative democracy as well.
It was very poorly
But it's
represented because they
it's
also
oh,
they also
no
gerrymander,
shit.
and they
Yeah, no,
also have
we have
they need.
gerrymandering here.
Beg pardon?
We have gerrymandering here.
Yeah, we have a sophisticated version of gerrymandering, but at least we have an independent organisation that can look at the
Oh yeah,
size of
yeah.
an electorate
That's
and
another thing
choose,
I spoke about in that video.
which is 76,000 people in each electorate, whatever the size is,
Yeah,
based on the
yeah.
population, and then the boundaries are divided up just to split that up. But
We,
that is done. But in the United States, that is decided by a partisan group.
I know. Yeah, I know.
Whereas here,
I say,
you never hear anybody complain about the Australian Electoral Commission or the commission responsible for that,
no.
because it's not partisan.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, I
it
know.
may not be fair in some instances, and there will people that will object to it, of course, because they'll say the division is unfair. But at the end of the day, it's about as fair as you can get. And the other thing too is that we have, in terms of representation, is preferential voting, which
Yeah,
most other countries don't. So even the UK is unfair because that's first past the post, and
yeah,
it's not compulsory. So you
yeah.
still get a skewed view of the electorate because you don't find out what the preferences would be if they're the number one person that the person voted for doesn't get in.
The
Yeah,
big advantage of the preferential system is that you don't get extreme governments like they've got in the United States, right?
yeah.
Because
Well, you don't get two party preferred. You don't get a two party system.
yeah, yeah.
If they had
Um,
preferential voting, they
Mind
would have
you,
more and more parties that would at least have an
the, the
opportunity to.
the Liberals and the Nationals and the Labour Party here are doing all they can to reduce the impact of minor parties and independents with
Yeah.
rules that they've legislation they just recently passed.
Now, Avery, you we better think, we've been raving for nearly 40 minutes. Do you which is amazing in itself. But you
Yeah,
wanted to talk about Senator Rennick, so I'm just going to pass it over to you to do your
yeah,
thing. Tell us about him.
right. Yeah. Thank you. Senator Rennick is a Queensland senator. He's been there for 6 years, and he just recently I subscribed to an mailing list that he's got. He's an independent. He used to be a liberal or a national. Quit the whichever party it was, and then he ran as an independent. Became a Queensland senator. Been there for 6 years, and he just recently, yesterday or the day before, I got an email from him in which he said that immigration was a greater threat to the environment and the economy of Australia than climate change. Now, he doesn't explain anything about what's wrong with, how immigrants are a greater threat to the country than climate change. He clearly doesn't understand anything about climate change because he's one of these conspiracy theorists who believes that there's a cabal of scientists, or every one of the 70 odd thousand climate scientists on the planet, that are all colluding together to say climate change is real, etc. And they're only doing it so they can make millions of dollars out of the governments. And uh, um, I'm just wondering. I've written a letter that I'm going to send to him to explain what it is about immigrants that makes them such an existential threat to Australia, to our economy and the environment. And I imagine that what will happen is I'll get the standard acknowledgement of receipt of the letter, and then crickets. But I'm asking him in that letter to explain what that threat is and why he thinks that immigrants are a threat.
Do you
He
think that
doesn't.
for the next election that will be a major issue?
If I can make it one, I will. If I can make, if he's saying this, I mean, I pointed out to him in the letter, that I'm an immigrant. I'm a proud immigrant. My wife is a proud immigrant. He is descended from immigrants, and every person in this country that's not indigenous is descended from immigrants.
So true. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
That immigration improves this country socially, economically, in every way.
Yep.
Right? It improves the this country. It's one of the things that makes us such a truly great nation, much greater, I think, not power, not economic power, not militarily, culturally and socially. It makes us a far superior country to the United States of Trumpistan.
Yeah,
Right?
ain't that the truth?
And
Yeah.
I truly value the the fact that Australia was kind enough and good enough to let me come and live here. Right?
Well, we
And I
all,
value the fact that I've got Muslim friends. I've got Iraqi, they're
yeah.
Iraqis, they're Pakistanis, they're Bangladeshis. I've got friends from Somalia. I value those friendships, and I'm so pleased to see them here. And I want to know what Rennick has got against immigrants that he says he doesn't say stop, reduce all immigration. He doesn't specify at all what he wants to do. He just wants to reduce it. Is it only European immigration, European people coming from? You remember the White Australia policy? Is that does he want to go back to that? Right? Does he want to stop brown people and yellow people and coming here? Does
Who
he?
does he? Who does he want to start? Does he understand the consequences too of cutting down immigration and what that would mean in terms of skilled labour, the houses that we need to
Yeah,
have built, all those other issues that
yeah,
are really
e-
important.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I came here. When I came here, I'd spent 25 years in defence, or 22 years in defence. I had the skill set I had meant that when I arrived here, I started looking for work, and I get a phone call one day from a guy who was the CEO of a small Adelaide-based company, and he said, "We know what you used to do in the UK. We'd like you to come and work for us. Would I go for an interview?" So I went for an interview, and when we were talking, he said, "What sort of salary would you expect?" Well, I'd looked up the sort of salaries I could expect, and I just added $10,000 to it, and he didn't bat an eyelid. All right,
Yeah.
we need skilled people in this country. What does he want to change? What does um, Rennick want to change? What does I just don't understand where he's coming from, because he hasn't said what the problem is. Just
Yeah.
that they are the greatest threat. It smacks to me. I'm not saying it is, but it smacks to me that there might be a bit of racism in there. I don't know.
Well, my God, I reckon that you're right, Avery.
Yeah.
There is a bit of racism. Okay, let's we'll finish it off there. Stay online so I can have a
Oh,
chat to you
sorry.
afterwards. I've got,
Can
yep,
I
sure.
just quickly say on that? I've written a letter that I'm going to be sending to him. It's around 1,500 words long. Now, I studied earth sciences in the 1970s. I understand a damn sight more about climate than he does. He's got fancy degrees in taxation law and finance. Doesn't qualify him to pontificate on the climate. And uh, with that letter, it's going to be a basis for a video that I'm going to be making in the next day or so, all addressed to uh, Senator
When
Rennick.
you when you make that video, I suggest you put in the comment section on this live feed, Avery, so that people that do watch us in the future can have a
Yeah,
look at that as well and
thank
just
you.
promote it that way.
Yeah, will do.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to say thanks everybody for being in. Particularly thanks to Avery for his contribution. It's always great to have these chats with Avery. If you've got any comments that you wish to make, please feel free to make them below, and please remember to do your thing and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell for further notifications. I'm aiming to get up to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year, which would be rather nice. So thanks everybody for being here. Thanks again, Avery, and everybody take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.